The US likes to be seen as one of the world's leading human rights advocates, but at home it faces growing accusations of hypocrisy. Tens of thousands of professional torturers have reportedly been trained on American soil over the past 60 years, and it's claimed that many of them have used their techniques abroad, as Kaylin Ford reports.
Where are you taking me?
It's been 30 years since Colombian soldiers kidnapped, beat, starved, and electroshocked Hector Aristizabal, all for having a, quote, subversive book. But it's a memory he relives every day.
Few people have survived torture in Colombia, so I'm very lucky to be able to tell the story. Most people get tortured for 10 days, that's the standard, and then they get shot and killed. Many had been disappeared.
Hector says the Colombian soldiers who tortured him and later killed his brother were trained right here on American soil at the School of the Americas in Fort Benning, Georgia. Army Major Joseph Blair was an instructor there.
I was very much in favor of the School of the Americas during the Cold War era.
But Major Blair says he was horrified with what his former students did with their anti-communist training in their own countries.
The classified manuals that the Army School of the Americas used the words interrogate, extortion, assassinate, neutralize. In common layman's terms, it all equates to torture.
Graduates from the School of the Americas have been implicated in massacres and torture throughout the hemisphere. Of the more than 60,000 soldiers and police to have graduated, 10,000 of them have been Colombian.
Colombia has been the largest user of the School of the Americas, and I don't think it's an accident that Colombia is the biggest abuser of human rights in the Western Hemisphere.
The Eighth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution forbids torture and other forms of cruel and unusual punishment, as does the Geneva Convention. But
it did happen. There's no question that our country not only engaged in torture itself, but taught others how to do it. We also rendered people, we also sent people to prisons in other countries where they were in fact tortured there.
Although Congress demanded more oversight of military training programs, an internal investigation by the Government Accountability Office showed that School of the Americas manuals advocated using, quote, torture, truth serum, blackmail, and execution. The Pentagon said it didn't know what the manuals contained because its staff advisors assigned to review them didn't speak Spanish. United Nations Special Rapporteur for Torture Juan Mendez, himself a survivor of torture, says a lack of transparency in the U.S. led to further abuse.
In the 80s, unfortunately, military aid and police aid was restored. And after that, it's been difficult to document to what extent that aid includes teaching techniques that are prohibited by law or by international law.
It's a legacy that sharply contrasts with U.S. rhetoric about respect for human rights abroad. Torture survivors and religious leaders in Washington, D.C. have come together to demand a full commission of inquiry into what they describe as torture practiced or enabled by the United States, including in its own prisons like Guantanamo Bay and by the CIA.
When President Bush says that he waterboarded and he would do it again, and he's a damn right that he had ordered it. Obviously, it's a very serious problem for the spirit and soul of our country.
Estimates of how many prisoners were tortured by the United States are hard to find, but survivors like Hector say the numbers don't tell the full story.
When someone gets tortured, not only the person who suffers torture has to deal with that big wound that it causes us, and the torturer is also someone who has to dehumanize themselves in order to dehumanize another human being. But a society that supports torture is going to pay a price, a very big price as well.
Kaylin Ford, RT, Washington, D.C.